Yeah, so the thing is doing, oh, good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's class. Um, yeah, so sorry if we delayed a bit. We had some technical issues. Welcome to today's class. I'm so glad to have you all today. So I've been getting a lot of questions about the tags on tables and the tags on creating the tribute page. So I'm just going to explain the questions I got, like answer the questions I got from the form, because I have said it earlier on that every question should be sent to us through the form, right? So good evening, guys. I'm just going to start with the assignments. Let me explain the tribute tax, right? There's a So I'm just going to open the Zuri, my Zuri dashboard. I have it opened already. Yes, so the tribute tax. I got a question that says if we can style the tribute tax, right? So for this question, I need you guys to understand that we are not restricting you guys. We're going to teach you guys CSS too, right? So it will actually be very impressive if you start, applying CSS in your work. But we're not going to attach any extra mark for that or reduce marks from those people that do not design their tribute page, right? In as much as it's actually very, very nice to have a cool page and to make your work beautiful, there'll be no extra marks for that, or there will be no penalty, right? For those that do not make their work beautiful, simply because we have not started CSS officially. But yes, from the videos we have released, and you should see like the introduction to HTML, the mentor there, Nino, she touched a bit on CSS, right? And even in this assignment, you can see that there's a CSS style tag here that we asked you all to attach to the image, right? We asked you to style this, right? Attach this this to the image, right? That's because, yeah, you can actually, CSS actually goes with HTML, but we're actually touching HTML first. So if you use CSS in your work, it is actually impressive. We like that. We like the fact that you're exploring things and you're trying out new things. But if you use CSS in your work, then we're not going to penalize you for that. So you're not restricted. If you want to even go ahead to use JavaScript in your work, feel free to use it. Nobody is restricting you, but there'll be no penalty for those that do not use JavaScript or CSS in their work, since we've not like officially introduced it. But yes, from what we've been doing so far, I'm sure you all would have gotten an idea of CSS already. So that is that for that question that says, can I use CSS? Yeah. So somebody said she does not understand the tribute page tax. I already explained it in previous office hours, right? You can check out the last office hour I had on Monday to, get answer to that. So, but for now, I'm going to explain Mr. Ade's tax. I didn't really touch so much on it last time, and I got like multiple questions on Mr. Ade's tax. So first of all, before talking about Mr. Ade's tax, I need you guys to understand something. We're teaching you guys tables because it's just a topic in HTML, right? When you start learning CSS and other things, you'll get to understand that you really do not need tables, right? We just want you to understand how tables work. But when it comes to CSS, you're going to be using things like grid and flexbox to make tables. You're going to be using things like grid and flexbox to make tables. That is actually the way we make tables, right? That is the better way to make tables. But being that tables existed, right? Table is existing in HTML. We need you to understand, okay, how these tables work so you can, better appreciate what CSS is doing for you, right? Back then, before we started having before CSS actually started improving and other stuff. Back then, to create a website, you actually use HTML you actually use tables for structures, right? Back then, if you want to create a website, you use the table to structure your website. So something like this now, back then, it would be like a table with 2 columns, first of all. This one can be 1 column, and then this one is another column. And then inside this column, you now start breaking it down to structure your image for this part. Extending it further, you can see that this place now, we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This thing here, we can actually use to structure a website, right? To give it structure. But that is actually so stressful, using tables for structure. It is very, very stressful to do that. And it is actually an outdated kind of thing, right? People nowadays use CSS to design, to create layouts for web pages, right? You can still use CSS to create tables, grid and flexbox, and create wonderful design very easily without stress. So the whole point of this assignment basically is just to help you guys understand, okay, this is how tables actually work. But it's not like in the future, you're going to be using so much of tables. You're going to be using more of CSS to create layouts and designs, right? So I'm just saying that to help you understand the fact that, okay, there'll be a replacement, like using CSS for layout and all that. You're not going to be using tables to structure a website and all that kind of stuff. But you just need to, have a basic understanding of how these tables work. So the class is for front end, right? If you are a full stack person, it means that, okay, you're doing front end in addition to a back end language like Node.js or like Python, right? But you're actually supposed to attend front end classes. Not all the classes, you just pick a particular class you want to attend and attend, right? To understand better the resources that were sent out, right? So looking at this to-do says to ease the tax of Mr. Ade, prepare an HTML table. And it says that the heading should contain details about the school, teacher, and class. I'm not going to be doing this, but I'm going to explain key points. Like this place says, ensure the table head has a serial number. I got a question. Now, what does it mean for a table head to have a serial number, right? Students, what does it mean for you to have a serial number? So I'm just going to explain that, right? So from last time we had this, right? So I'm just going to clear this off. Now, before I proceed to explain what I want to explain, when it comes to HTML, right? Just have this P tag here. When it comes to HTML and CSS, we actually have what we call inline CSS and external CSS. This document I have right here is called index.css. That's an external file, right? That I'm going to put in all my designs for my web page. And then this external style, I have linked it here. I have linked it here. I have linked it to my HTML file, right? So that any style I actually put in this index.css will be applied to my HTML document, right? So I can style my HTML document from this file here. But apart from the external CSS, we have what we call internal CSS, right? The internal CSS, you just actually put in a style tag and you design your work inside here, right? But for this, we also have what we call inline CSS. And inline CSS is actually when you get to design your HTML using the style tag as an attribute, right? So I can come here and put in this style tag now. This is a tag. This is an attribute, right? I can put a style attribute in my HTML. This is like using inline CSS, right? I can put a style attribute here and I can say something like, okay, I want color to be red. So something like this. This is an attribute that can be used on HTML tags. This is an attribute that can be used on HTML tags, right? So if I come here and I put, I am Victoria, if I open this with live server, if I open with live server, you can see that my statement here, I am Victoria, is actually red. That is a style attribute that can be used in HTML without necessarily using the external CSS file, right? That is a style attribute. Now, what I'm saying this is because I need you all to understand that in your work, when it comes to your work, right, your HTML document, everything has to be neat. And because of that, there are upgrades from time to time. Certain things that you can do in your HTML, right? You may not be able to do it in your HTML again. Something that you could do in your HTML last month, you may not be able to do it in your HTML again because of upgrade, right? They have upgraded it, right? They may have allowed you before to give a border in your table, like use the border attribute in your table, for example, right? Like last month, last 2 months. But right now, that has gone out, right? Now you can no longer use the border attribute directly. You now have to use a CSS file, an external CSS file, or you can put it inside the CSS style tag. So basically what I'm trying to say is that things get updated, and this is kind of update I was talking about when I said you have to be up to date, right? So this upgrade comes up to make the HTML documents better, to make your website function better and the likes. So yeah, so I'm just going to, I'm going to create a table, right? I'm going to create a table just to explain what we mean by the ID attributes and the class attributes. You're going to be doing CSS soon, right? I'm going to touch a bit on CSS today, right? Just to explain what we mean. The ID attributes and class attributes are attributes that are actually used to, design your work, right? So yeah, I have the style. I have style attributes here, color equals to red. Let's say I don't want to use this in the style attributes to style my work. I can give it an ID, right? I can give it an ID. I can give it an ID of, like I said, please feel free. You can try out CSS if you want. We're not holding you back, right? So this place now, I can give it a style. I can give it an ID of Vic, right? This is an ID, and I can have another paragraph too. I am Vic too. And I'll give this an ID, I'll give this a class of Vic1. So when we said that each TD and each TR should have a class attribute and an ID attribute, according to the assignment, let's check that out. So it says ensure that the table head TD has a serial number. Okay, I'll explain that part. But it says ensure that your table row, which is the TR element, has a class attribute, and that each subject score, the TD, has a class attribute, right? So each TD should have a class attribute. What we simply mean is your TD elements, right? Your TD element simply puts a class. You can give it a class of your choice. Class, the difference between class and ID is that ID is actually unique from the name. ID, like the way you have ID card, you have a different ID card number, somebody else have a different ID card number. ID is actually unique. So if you're giving your TR ID, right, you have to give them unique IDs because you cannot have one ID repeating. But class, just the way you have different people in SS1 class or different people in a university, right? That's the same way with class. Different people can have the same class, but different people cannot have the same ID. So if we say add a class to each TR or each TD, it means that you should just simply add the class attribute there, right? Just add the class attribute. If you go further to use it, then impressive. But if you do not use it, then we're not going to still penalize you for that. This is what I mean by using it. Now we have a class attribute, right? We can now come to index.css and use the class attribute there, right? So to use a class attribute, you just do dot, and then you call the class name. This is already a CSS file, so it recognizes everything I'm doing. So .vic, I think that's the name I gave to my, okay, that's the class. I gave it .vic1, right? You can just give you a color pink, right? This is me using the class. This is me using the class, and it is something that you will use when you start writing CSS. You always use class and ID attributes when you start writing CSS. So when we say give it a class, give it a class, right? So me now, I'm using this class here. I'm using this class here, .vic. I'm using this class here. I'm giving anything that has the class vic1. I'm giving that in pink. So if I have another P here, and the class is also vic1, I can give it two classes. I can give two elements the same class. So I can name this hello world, right? Hello world. These two, they are both sharing the same class, but two elements cannot share the same ID, right? So I've given this an ID of Vic. I can use this ID here. To use the ID, I just use the hash and put Vic. That's the way we use ID in CSS. I'm just going to give it color red. So if I go to my live server now, you can see that I have these two with the same class, having the same pink color, and I have this one with an ID having red. So basically, more than one element can share the same class, but only one element can have one particular ID. Just like the way human ID cards in real world works, right? The real world works. So basically, just add the class. Ensure you have to follow the instruction. If you add only in sum and you don't add in sum, you're going to get your grade is going to be reduced because you have to follow the instructions. So ensure that each subject class, each subject score TD adds a class attribute. So give all your TD a class attribute and give all your TR a class attribute too. So your TD and your TR can have the same class. You can just give them hello as their class. Give all of them hello as class. So you can copy and paste that all through, right? So this place says TD has make sure that TH has a serial number. So I'm just going to create a table right now. I'm just going to create a table right now. To create a table, you use the table tag, right? Use the table tag. And after you create the table, tables have rows and they have columns. So you basically just create you create the row, the number of rows that you want, right? You can have many rows depending on you. So I'm just going to create a 3x3 table. No, a 2x2 table is enough actually. I'm just going to create a 2x2 table. So this table now has 2 rows already. It has 2 rows already, right? 2 rows already. Then inside these rows now, I'll now give it the number of columns I want to give it. But the number of columns you are giving a row, right? The number of columns you are giving this year has to be the same number of columns here. If you don't want it to be the same number of columns, then you have to use column span to make your table look normal, right? And that is the reason why we asked you guys to use column span to understand better how column span works. Because even the concept of column span will be applied to grid and flexbox when you are trying to make tables with grid and flexbox, right? The idea of column span, it just happens. It is actually normal in even in your Excel file when you have your documents in school or whatever thing that has to do with tables. You see that okay, some cells are actually bigger than some cells are actually smaller than some. That is actually just column span, the concept behind column span. So I have two rows here. TR means rows. So I have 2 rows already here. I can create my table head now. So I want it to be a 2x2 table. So I'm just going to create a table head. Table head is actually different from table data. The table head actually gives your table, the table head simply means the heading of the table, right? The heading of the table. So this is my heading of table now. This place says your table head should have a serial number. It should have a student section. It should have subject heading, and it should have total score as columns, right? So you give this in your table head, right? But I'm not going to do this assignment for you all, but I'm just going to show you what it would mean for me now. So I want to create table head for my table. I want to give my table now it's a 2x2 table. So I'm just going to give it a serial number and a name section, right? So I can have 2 table heads. I'm just going to give it S/N. This is what I want to be displayed in my table, right? S/N. And I can now come here and do TH, right? And put another heading. So I'm just going to give this names, right? This is my heading. This is my heading. I have 2 columns, and in the 2 columns, the first column says SN, which is serial number, and the second column says name. So for those that are asking what does it mean for a column to have serial number, it just means just label the column SN and put serial numbers there. What are serial numbers? You put numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, depending on how many names you are helping Mr. Ade. You are building a table for Mr. Ade. How many names you are actually creating the table for to help Mr. Ade. So I have SN here, and here I remember what I said. Your table head, right, has to have the same. It has to have the same number of columns. If not, your table will be disorganized, right? So I have TH here. 1 under SN. I have 1, and I have TH here. No, sorry. This should be TD. You can only have 1 table head, right? So after you give your table head, the next one is table data, right? After you give your table head, the next one is table data. So I'm just going to give my table data under names now, because this is the table head SN, right? This is the table head names, meaning that the first table data will go under SN, and the second table data will go under names. So what do I want under SN? My serial number is number 1, right? And then under names, I want to put I am Victoria, right? So I have a 2x2 table. So if I go to my live server now, let's see what happens there. As you can see now, I have a table here, but you notice that the table does not have any border, right? Table does not have a border, right? Normally, this is what I mean now by updates, right? Normally in HTML, like last month ago, you see that HTML5, right, actually accepts the attributes border. So I can just come here and give my table border equals to 1, and it would normally work, right? As you can see, I have SN number 1 under it. I have names. I am Victoria under it, right? So this would normally work. But as you can see, right now it's showing red. It's still actually displaying, but it's showing red here. That's because there is now an update. There's now an update, right? That says that I cannot use the border attributes any longer in my table head section, right? I cannot use the border attributes any longer. So if I come here now and I even use the style attributes, right? The border attribute can be used in CSS, right? In CSS, it has to be just like making your work better. So it can be used in CSS. If I even put here, if I come here and I put border equals to 1, sorry, border 1. If you come right here, you see that, let me correct that, I made a mistake. I'm not having my border yet. Oops. That's because basically I'm not supposed to do this, right? The style tag works, but I'm not supposed to do this. If I want to use a border right now, with the latest updates, right? If I want to use a border right now, I have to put my 1 pixels, give it a border thickness, right? And give it a color, right? I have to like specify in full that, okay, I want this border 1 pixels and I want it to have this color and I want it to be this thick, right? So if you put just border 1 pixels in old HTML, it would work, right? And just give everything a border. But in HTML5 right now with the updates, it would not work. And this is the kind of update that you actually have to be aware of, because apart from this, there are like other updates that come up from time to time and you just have to be updated as a developer, right? So if I come back here now, this does not even look like inline CSS is always terrible because you have to like pack styles with your code. So while this is actually acceptable, the whole idea of this border stuff, right, apart from like other reasons, changing the border actually, changing the way you actually style your table actually makes your work even better. So I can, I can take this off, right? I can take this off and attach this to a CSS file, right? So I can just call my table here. I can call my table here and give it a border of 1 pixels solid red. So I can change this here and give it a border of 1 pixel solid red, right? And this would also like take effect here, right? But if you notice, like I'm only giving my table in full a border, but my cells are not having borders, right? To do this, I have to like indicate that yes, I want my TD and my TH to have borders. And if I come here now, it has borders, right? So in as much as if you, oh God, in as much as if you come here, if you come here and put in the border equals to 1. In as much as it runs in your live server, it is actually a bad practice right now because it is no longer accepted in HTML5. So for you to do this, it's better you use you follow the instructions, right? So you can either use a star tag, a star attribute here, or you can put it inside here, right? So as you can see, I just gave my table TH, my table and my table data, my table edge, a border of 1 pixels solid red, right? So back to this part here now that says Let's check that out again. This place says ensure your table has a border of value 1. It says you should give your table cell padding and cell spacing with a value of 5. So basically what cell padding and cell spacing simply means is, let me go here. Cell padding is just the way you have, okay, let's say the way you buy your phones, right? And there's this foam in the corner of your phones, right? When you buy it, or when you buy a television, or when you buy a television, right? And there's this foam at the corner, this white thing at the corner, right? That is them padding your phone. So, remove your phone from the edges of the pack exactly. So that's them padding it. So that's like the same thing with cells. Cells can be padded in the sense that this space, now you see these names that is here, this space here, up and down, the space in this cell can actually be increased. You can pad the cell, right? It will not make the cell bigger, right? You can pad any cell. And then cell spacing. Cell spacing just simply means, okay, see this cell now and see the second cell. Please let them be spaced, right? They are already like a little bit, they are spaced here. It's cell spacing actually have a default of 2 pixels. So for every table you are creating, it would naturally have it 2 pixels space, right? 2 pixels size of space. And that's the space you are seeing here, this small space you are seeing here, right? That's the small space you are seeing here. But now we want you to, alter that default setting. Give it a cell spacing of 4 pixels according to the assignment here. So give it a cell padding and a cell spacing of 5 pixels, right? So I can just come to my VS Code and alter that. The default is actually 2, but I can come here and I can say, okay, so I can come here and give my cell. I can say, okay, I want to give my table a cell spacing of 5 pixels, right? So if I come here right now, you can see that my cell now have a bigger, like it's now like, it now has more space, right? That's basically just cell spacing. So just give your table cell spacing of 5 pixels, right? And then you can also give your table cell padding according to what we asked you guys. But cell padding, let me explain now. Cell padding and cell spacing. Cell spacing is just basically separate the cells, give it spaces, right? Cell padding is basically pad the cells, right? Pad the cells. So let's see what happens when I do this. Let's just say something. As you can see now, my cells are not padded. You can see that it is actually very, very visible now. My cells are padded. But that's like, I gave it 20 pixels and that's so much. The requirement says 5 pixels, right? So you can give yourself cell padding of 5 pixels. So you can give yourself a cell padding of 5 pixels and you see that it is padded, right? It is padded with 5 pixels, right? And then for this, you can actually also, if you don't want to do this, if you don't want to add this here, let's say you want to use CSS to add this cell spacing and cell padding, right? You can come here. In CSS, you don't put cell spacing, you put border spacing, right? So I'm just going to call my table again. Just going to put my table here. I'm going to give it a padding, right? Just going to give So in CSS, you just call it border spacing. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to take this out. So let's just, if you're using a CSS file to add yours, so border spacing of 20 pixels, and it spaces the border, right? Oh, it spaces the border, right? That was border spacing. So I can actually space my border. I'm just going to add this. I'll have this here. So I can actually space my border in CSS. So then you see that I actually called the table element separately, and I gave it the border spacing of 20 pixels, and you saw that it actually spaced the border, right, from all the cells, the border of the table from all the cells. So the border spacing, yeah, you're giving the border spacing to table, TD, and TH. It actually spaces everything, the border, right? So if I come here now, so but that's like if you want to do for CSS, and then CSS, you can also add padding too. You can also just add padding, and it applies to like everything. You can add padding here and it applies to like everything. If I come here and I take this padding away, I'm putting this my padding for the table TH and TD, right? All the cells. So if I come here, the padding just applies to everything. So you can see that it's padding here, padding here, padding here, padding here, and it's also padding the table itself. It's also padding the table itself. So, but that's like for CSS. So for the HTML directly, you can just, put it directly there. I'm just going to do Control Z. So you can just put that directly there and it applies. Like this is what we actually asked you to do. This is what we asked you to do, right? When we start learning CSS, we're going to like touch so many other things that you need to know, right? But for now, this is just what the assignment says. And that's just like even me doing it right now. But that is basically what the assignment says. Just give it an attribute, cell padding and cell spacing of value 5. And then, okay, let me explain this file that says ensure your total scores. The total scores have as a score span twice the score column. Okay, so I said the number of table head, the number of table columns has to be the same for every row. If I come here now and I put an extra column, right? I put an extra column and name it what? If I come here now, you can see that this table is not just making sense, because how can you have 2 columns, 3 columns at the top, and then have 2 columns at the bottom? It does not make sense. This is so disorganized. So you have to make sure that both of them have the same table, the same number of columns. The same columns here should be the same columns below. So I'm just going to take this out. Now, let's say I want to do a column span, right? So this normally, I'm giving this my names, right? Just 1 column, right? Let's assume that according to the assignment, they said give your total score, give your scores the same as total column span of 2 for total score. So let's say this place is total scores now. Let's say this is scores, right? According to the assignment. This place is scores and this place is, so this place is score, right? let me just, for me to do that, I have to like create a fresh table and stuff. So let me just explain with this what that means. So this place says, I want to give this column now that has one, and I want to give this column that has one a column span of 2, right? I want to give this table that have one a column span twice of this SN. This SN have a column as it's just taking one column normally. I'm not giving this like 2 columns, just taking itself one column for SN. Now I want to make sure that this TD, the column under it, the next row, this column here that is supposed to one column. So I want to make sure that this column have a column span twice of this SN. It's just for me to first of all take away this. I'm taking away this because if this one is going to have a column span of, if this one is going to have a column span twice of this one, it simply means that this one is going to consume this whole space. So it will not make sense for me to have that that other column that have I am Victoria there, right? Because if you I didn't mean if I leave that there now, right? And I give this a column span, for you to give the column span, just put the column span there. And I give the column span of 2 because this one have a column span of 1 naturally. And I give this one a column span of 2, right? So I come here now, you can see here now that the table does not make any sense because this is taking 2 column span. Where is this one coming from? It's like outside, this is like disrupting things. So I have to just like take this out. I have to take this out because since this is taking a column span of, it means that this one is already taking 2 columns. And remember what I said, the rule is that every row have the same column. So if this one is already taking 2 columns, then it means that you cannot add extra ones so that these 2 columns will match these 2 columns. So so that is it. You can see now that the table makes sense. So 2 columns, just that this one is actually spanning 2 columns. So that's what column span simply means. So if I say give this place a column span twice of this one now, I'm like making names have 2 columns. So this actually column span is actually, I've explained column span in detail. I explained it, like I gave a detailed explanation on column span in the video that was sent out. Please do well to go through the video, right? I'm supposed to have ended this call ever since because of other mentors class. So I'm just going to end it right now. Thank you so much for attending the class. My next office hour, I'm going to explain more about these things and, you know, attend to other questions. Thank you so much. Bye for now. I have to end the call right now so other mentors can have their classes. Thank you so much. I hope to see you in the next office hour.